Welcome to our evening session. Leadership, all things leadership, conflict, management of humans. Who thinks business is easy until you add people? Yeah, all right, well, you're in the right room. I agree. Curious to know, what are your thoughts on the title of this session? Because I read it, and I changed a bunch of stuff in my session once I saw the title myself. What would you guys like to talk about today? What do you think we should be talking about today?
About how guys suck.
About how guys suck. It's all your fault. All right, you can leave. You learned. What else? What are some things that come to mind when you read that session title? Totally. How many have that happen? You hire someone, they're excited, 3 to 6 months in, suddenly performance starts to drop. Something's up. What else? Yeah, you got that, yeah? We were just talking about that earlier. So it was interesting for me building this session because I was told originally I was going to talk about recruiting. And then I saw about a week and a half ago that I was talking about conflict in people and management. So what I did is I dug up the last 20 years of my life, the things that I've covered on leadership, on people, on structure. I also run, if you guys know, Breakthrough Academy, so we spend a lot of time structuring organizations. And I put together what I think is probably all the elements that are going on in your organization. And what I would like for you guys to do is to try and pick one of them today that you can actually go do. We're going to talk about situational leadership. We're going to talk about conflict management. We're going to talk about job descriptions. We're going to talk about all both structural and emotional sides of an organization when it comes to leading people. And it was good for me today because I got to do a conflict booth, or what would we call it, conflict management roundtable. What is the thing we just did? Yeah, and some of you were in there. And I got to listen to a lot of you guys too and see what's going on. And it is really both. It is, hey, we need to be better at how we communicate and talk and manage our people and lead. But we also have to be better at how we set up structure for those people. Because how many fires actually are getting created because of the piss poor structure we put in place, or the piss poor expectations that we set early on, or our inability to manage and lead and drive and bring clarity to them in their direction long term because we're so busy, right? So I'm going to touch on a little bit of both, and hopefully all of you will get one thing out of it, if not many, many things. We always give templates on this, so we'll have a QR code at the end, but just look out for this. We put in a lot of the frameworks we're going to talk about today that you can take and run with, so look out for that. And I've already said this, but make sure you just pick one thing from today. Don't pick 7. Probably won't get all 7 done. So my name's Danny. I'm from Breakthrough Academy. Who's heard of BTA before? Breakthrough Academy. I've been around for a long, long time. Started actually a lot with the PCA. One of my first big speaking events was with the PCA at the annual conference. But we spent the last 10 years understanding the mechanics of business in the contracting space. My background's in franchising myself. I used to work with College Pro Painters when I was a kid, so I was 18 years old, running a little franchise when I was about 28, so I was with them for about 10 years, and was a franchisee myself, so hired my own first 6 painters, had 3 of them quit on the first week, training them, up to having 100 painters and 12 franchisees under me over the summer times, and learned a lot about people. How to manage people, how to manage myself, my emotions, theirs, and how to structure them properly. And it is really a balance of the heart and the head. My ability to strategically set up structure for them and to be a good, emotionally intelligent leader, right? So we'll talk a lot about that today. So I would love to know who feels like this, because I see this all the time, but who feels a little more like a babysitter than a leader these days? Yeah. Okay, you're not alone. There is a shift that we have to go into this session with, is we have to get away from this boss mindset that we have, right? Which is like, I'm paying you to do your job. Why are you not doing your job? That's, to me, a transactional relationship, right? Or just resorting to just do what I say, because out of frustration, you can't seem to get them to do it, right? What this causes is a team that doesn't think for themselves, right? And they hide their creative genius because they're told to do what they're doing. They get an employee mindset. I had a really interesting experience with this, working with franchisees, so young students who ran small painting companies over the summer, the most challenging thing I think a small 18, 20-year-old person could do in their younger years anyways, and watching how their leadership and their independent thinking grew over that summer. And then some of them I actually hired to help me recruit franchisees in the off season, so they come to campus with me and help me do campus recruiting, and how they turned it back off. And I was like, my ability to open up your thought and your responsibility of what you're actually doing. When you think you're running a company, you think differently. When you think you work for me, you actually stop thinking as much. It was a really interesting experiment with me. And what I've realized is I went from being their coach during the summer times to their boss in the fall when they were working for me. And there is a big difference for all of us. If we're in this boss mindset, I am your boss, I am going to run off of authority and for you to follow what I do because I say you need to do it this way, versus I am your coach. I want what's best for you and your ability to go perform in the field. Yes, we want to win and play this game together, but my success only comes from your success. Right? To the point of where you actually have to tie your hands behind your back a little bit and not go do and fix the issues. You have to only do it through them. It's a very challenging thing to do, especially when your business needs you to go book that job. But like, I refuse to go book that job. I'm going to do it through you. To go produce that project that maybe is a bit above their skill level. It's like, I refuse to fix it. It's like, I'm going to do it through you. So my hope today is to help you guys shift from a little bit of that boss mindset to more of that coach mindset. And I don't think any of you are probably on one side or the other, right? I'm sure we all have a bit of both elements inside of us. But it's to realize, where are we being a bit too much of a boss? Where we probably just need to be a bit more of a coach. And the impact is big, right? Grab your phones while you have them. I saw you just had them because you were texting on them and emailing on them. Calculate this. How many people do you lead? And this can include subcontractors if you lead a bunch of subs. Times that by about 2,000 hours a year. How many hours are you leading in a year? What'd you get? Come on, give me numbers. 40,000. That's a lot. Yeah, what else? Everyone's like, I don't want to tell you. 46,000, okay. About 100,000, yeah. These are big amounts of hours, right? Like, you, in your hardest working year ever, could maybe work 4,000. That's 80 hours a week, right? So we fundamentally have to learn how to be better at this, because we will never be able to do all the hours ourselves, and we have to manage those 40,000, 100,000 hours with more and more excellence so that those hours can be productive. And what I've discovered after years of working with people is it kind of comes down to two things, right? This whole presentation, everything I'm going to teach you, comes down to the fact that they're either lacking skill or they're lacking commitment, or both. But it's usually one of the two. And it's one of the first things I ask myself when I'm working with somebody is, I'm like, hey, we have an issue here. Is this because of skill or is this because of commitment? And it takes me down one of two paths about how I approach it. Can you see that in your mind? Like, think about, actually, do all of you have like performance issues, people issues, something going on in the business? Actually, hands up if you don't. Right, okay, good, we're all in the right room then. So in that element, can you see how it could probably be either skill or commitment, and how your brain pretty quickly can determine what side of that lever that it's on? And some of you might be like, ooh, I think it's both. It could be both. Might be terms for rehiring that person. Maybe not the right fit for the right role for that person. But if it's one or the other, this is a really quick way to look at this. So as I talk through these concepts, I'll try to reference, hey, this is kind of a skill attack, or this is more of a commitment attack, if that'll help. So let's get into it. So the first thing that I think all of us miss on before we get into how we talk to people and how we get them more motivated and all this stuff is that we need to do a better job of setting expectations, right? You guys have all played this game before, right? I thought you had it. I thought that was your job. I didn't realize that, like, right? That miscommunication. So in that, there's fundamental things that are required. We need to establish roles properly within our organization. We need to have clear deliverables or numbers or KPIs attached to each role. We need to make sure they know who they're reporting to and on what. And we need to have some sort of incentive, some reason beyond just their base salary. How many of you need to probably build this out a little more? This is kind of half built. Okay. So just broad strokes for today, but like, this is an org chart, right? We've all probably built these, right? Have you all played around with this thing? Maybe in Excel, maybe in wherever you build it. What I think a lot of us are missing in this is not just thinking about who does what, right? Because this is the owner who's managing an office admin and a production manager and a crew lead and so on. It's a really good start. But what creates more power and momentum is when everyone has a number assigned to them. So I often build these not from like who's going to go do what in their job. I'll get there. I'll get there when I get to the job description. I start though with thinking who's going to deliver on what. And it's a fun exercise because it's not just this chart. It's usually a big Excel file that I'm figuring out our sales plan, and I'm figuring out our production plan, and I'm figuring out how much, labor hours are required and how much per week we're going to have to go after. And I start to think through what is the actual human capacity required to go do this. The amount of painting hours, the amount of jobs, the amount of leads, the amount of estimates, the amount of sales. And I can start to see numerically where all the puzzle pieces need to fit. And slowly over time, I can take that and bring those numbers to these roles. Right? Even my office admin, they need to keep AR below 5% because I can look based on my cash flow projections how much I can afford to float or how much I would like to be floating, right? but everybody has a number. So if I am as a company trying to shoot for 2.5 million this year at a 40% gross profit margin and have 60% of my customers recommend me to others, that's a quality score, I know that my production manager has to have some semblance of that goal, right? And I know that he needs to now lead crews that need to equal that goal. Who does this every year? Who's played around with this? This starts to bring clarity, and you start to realize roles aren't just added overhead, especially like your production manager. It's added opportunity to grow the organization because they will drive those organizational numbers versus just produce more work. So these are what's called deliverables. They're clear, measurable results that an employee must hit to kind of be saying, hey, I've done my job. I've delivered on what my weight to the organization is. This is how companies scale quite quickly, because when you figure this out, you're just in a game of hiring people. When I was running my franchisees, I used to look at the fact that I was like, each franchisee has a ROI rev of $40,000 year end after a summer of production. And there's all kinds of numbers that went into figuring that out. But once I knew that, I knew each turf that I could open up, how much ROI revenue I could increase by having another franchise hire by year end. Versus, can I afford them? Is it time? I'm not sure. Like, I started to see the numbers in it and realize I could build my organization by building out good people into good ROI-driven roles. Now, what do I do with this? This is where the expectations start to come in. I need to define this to my employee, because if I just give people an org chart that says, hey, you're all in charge of numbers now, people forget about it. Especially when I come back 6 months later and be like, you're not on target. They'll be like, what target? Right? So bake those numbers into your employment agreements. And I'll give you a template for this today, but this template is an employment agreement fully based on deliverables, where everybody has a number that they're directly in charge of achieving, and it's written clearly in their agreement, and the entire agreement is actually built off this first section. It's like a 7-page employment agreement. All of it's based on this tiny little section here that says deliverables. And what I mean by that is this person has to produce a certain amount, has a certain quality rating they have to hit, and so on. Actually, one note on that. When you're setting KPIs, try and make it around quality, volume, and profit as best you can by the role. The reason being, if it's all about volume, what happens? Quality slips. If it's all about profit, quality and revenue can sometimes slip. If you have all three, it kind of holds them in balance to think more dynamically about how they achieve the number. So I'll bake those deliverables in, and then I'll start to think through your accountabilities. These are the tasks of your job, but your tasks are directly related to the numbers we just spoke to. So deliverable 1, which was I think 4 million in production, here's all your production-related responsibilities, but as they relate to achieving that number. Does that make sense? So if you're not on pace to hit 4 million in production this year, I'm gonna go look at your responsibilities first and say, where are we missing? Versus a subjective, you're not doing your job. It's like, well, I'm working hard, I'm showing up, I'm getting the crews going, we're hitting, customers are happy. It's like, yeah, but we're not hitting production timelines. And that's part of the scheduling piece. I then take those deliverables and I need to think through day by day, week by week, month by month, how are you reporting in on all of this? How do we make sure that you're actually achieving results along the way? Because $4 million is a big number to go hit by year end, but it's not when you go weekly and you start to look week by week how people are trending. So who do you report to? When do you report in? And what are you reporting on? Have you ever had this with your team where you're like, we're gonna now set goals together and I need you to fill out this by end of week, and they go, but that's not my job, or I'm busy in production, man, right now. These need to be established early on in the employment agreement and talked through, not just as a, hey, cool, fun administrative thing to do, as a part of performance management. Like, I will help you hit these numbers. And why do they even care? Because the last piece in any agreement that matters is because your bonuses and incentives are directly tied to achieving those numbers. Again, I don't want to be your boss and tell you have to go do this. I want to be your coach and help you make as much money as humanly possible. Whenever you're setting these up, everyone sets them up a little bit differently. These ones are set up as targets. Personally, actually, it's funny. I do my best to set them up as unlimited potential in your ability. You have no cap in your bonuses. So what can that look like, right? You can say something like, I'm going against my own example, but that's okay. You need to produce this much, you get $7 million for that, or $7,000 for that. Or I could say, hey, Mr. Project Manager, I need you to produce, let's just use round numbers, $1 million this year at a 40% gross profit margin. So that means you're bringing the company $400,000. Does that kind of make sense? And maybe they pay them 80 grand base for that or something. But if you want to make more, you want to make 100, you want to make 200 grand, I don't really care. Because I'm going to give you 10% of everything you make over that $400,000. So you could produce $1 million at 40%, You could produce 900,000 at 45%. You could produce 1.2 million at 40%. I don't care the combo of how you figure this out, but through production capacity and profitability on jobs, I want you to think like your own little mini owner within my organization. You see what I'm saying about that? Now I'm not in their way anymore for their ability to go achieve more. How many of people come to you in the last year or two and needed a raise? Inflation hit everybody. It was a son of a bitch, right? And as owners, we're the ones that have to kind of pay for it, but it's coming out of our profits often. Or we have to increase our prices, and it should come out of their ability to go perform for themselves. Get out of their way and give them the ability to go achieve what they want to achieve. Any thoughts on this? Questions? Okay. So this is just like a really quick overview of like a long, intensive, undefined roles. But for all of us, if we don't define those roles properly, if we don't set up clear organizational structure, reporting structure, bonus structure, a good employment agreement around it, people will sometimes come to us, often come to us, and we're the problem, right? And we're trying to manage that conflict, but have we set up the structure properly for them? This solves a lot of it. Quick hiring tip on this. We just talked a lot about KPIs and goals. If you're hiring people and you're putting goals onto them, this is a must when you're interviewing. Look for something called attainment. It's the preference to set and hit goals. So it's beyond like, do you have good core values? Are you a good painter? Are you a good production manager? It's the actual, like, do you prefer to have goals in your life? And when you do, how do you perform under them? Do you know some people that hate goals? Does it actually even hurt them sometimes because they're just so stressed out from the goals? I do. I have different roles for those people, right? But for a lot of my organization, it's very performance driven, and this is a key part of like, are you thirsty for this? Are you hungry for this? Does this motivate you? And if it does, let's look at your past experience to see where that's actually come to be. Look for this in recruiting. All right, next big thing, obviously. People are lacking in skill. We need to do a good job of training them. And I think when I look at this industry, some of us do a better job than others, but I think there's always improvement here, right? Because I think even if we know how to do it, we probably don't always do it properly. Do you train the people the same way you did in April as you do in July? Right? Seasonality can even have an impact on this. So this is a pretty obvious question, and I expect a lot of yeses to this, but how many of you have just seen it, where it's like there's like the thing that keeps happening? My dumb one was the power washer. I don't know how many times I got called to come and start the power washer because my team couldn't figure it out. It's dumb, but it's something that like caused me a lot of grief because it's like, Danny, we can't start the power washer again. It's like, you've been there for 2 hours. What have you been doing? We've been trying to start the power washer. It's like, I need to get a new power washer. But ultimately, it was like, I needed to build a very simple little SOP around this instead of driving to the job site every other day to try and fix this for them. And so what I propose is that while you're building your training for your people, start to think about it by role. So we just talked about the employment agreement, right? We talked about all those responsibilities that somebody would have in their job. Go stare at that employment agreement for a second and ask yourself, do I actually have training for all these things I expect these people to do? Because I think for a lot of us, especially when we hire somebody with experience, we kind of assume that they know what they're doing. It's a big mistake. How many of you have hired experienced people and they end up being a mess? Yeah? Okay, all of us? Yeah, me too. I'll stare at this and I'll start to ask myself, like, is the employment agreement, is my training process reflected in my employment agreement? Do I have all the things I expect of you as a part of our training? And I'll start with just a checklist. So if there's the simplest thing you could ever do, if you don't have anything built yet, I would build a step-by-step checklist of all the elements of that person's job. What do they do on the site? What do they do off-site? What do they do in the office? What do they do when they're preparing before the job starts? What are all the elements of that role? Now, for me, as a trainer, this is a good checklist, right? So that I'm showing that I've actually trained them in this later on. I can check off on all these things, and they can check off that they've indeed learned it. But this is also a thing that I can build now, because each one of these things, appropriate job site attire, setting up and branding the site, job risk assessment form, ladder work for multi-ways, for extension ladders, for safety harnesses, this is for a painter, but it's all the little elements. I can now think through each one of those and build out what we call a competency model. Now, these were really powerful for me. It helped me score and give feedback and adjust and train people based on a standard. So all this really is it's a step-by-step checklist of one of those elements, right? So how to do job site setup. What are all the steps required in doing that? Now, this is great when I'm training because I can just check off step-by-step our way of doing it, but I can come back and evaluate on this sheet as well, right? So at the top, I can evaluate whether they did it successfully, partially, or not at all. I won't do that when I'm in initial training, but it's the same thing they learned on initially that I'm coming back to evaluate with them on later, if this kind of makes sense. So there's continuity in this one little sheet that I have for them. What do I want to say about this? I had a thought on this. Yeah. So actually, this is why I put these 3 notes here. So I'm using it for my initial training. So it's kind of to keep me as the trainer accountable and to make sure I'm following the steps. Like I'll give you an example. Like when I was in College Pro, we would teach people how to roll a wall in a very specific way, right? So you guys know the W pattern? You guys do that? We used to do our W pattern, get our paint spread out, roll, check for drips, move. So those were like our 3 steps to rolling a wall. And that was like, pop, pop, pop. Really simple. Now, that's a pretty simple SOP to remember, but there are other ones that they might want to reference for daily operations. So this is available to them at any time. Today's world usually digital with little video on Trainual or something like that, right? And then I would come back 6 months, 8 months later, or do a field visit because performance and numbers are down. So I'm like going into why the numbers are down, and I'm bringing my trusty little trainer sheet to evaluate them on sites. Make sense? That's also why numbers are so nice, because when I look and I'm like, productivity's down 4% on this specific crew, let me go in with my stuff I train them on and then check off and make X's, and it brings it right down to these 3 things. Your setup, your cleanup, and your prep. Everything else is fine. Let's focus in on those. But this brings that evaluation to life versus my opinion on Tuesday. Questions there? That's good. Now you can take these bullet points and what all these little things represent and go one step further. And this is when you start to build really robust processes for the company that creates a more scalable, even sellable organization, is you build them into SOPs, right? So how many of you have SOPs now for the company? Cool. I like to build them from the job description. So I've got, if you think about the thread I've lined, I've got my deliverables for the person, which leads to their responsibilities on their job, which then leads to their actual responsibilities to their job, which then leads to their actual like onboarding form, which I'm onboarding them on, which then leads to the evaluations I'm taking on them, which then leads to this. So it's all connected. Instead of it being kind of a random big book of SOPs that somebody needs to follow, it's specific to their job and specific to their role. We've built these, so if you're ever interested, we could show you, but we've built V1 of this, we just built V2 of this, but for painting, we've built all the SOPs by role, so that everything's kind of pre-templated for our customers, which is kind of cool. This is just a screenshot of it. So while I'm doing this, I'm training people. We used to do something called hand in the can. Do you guys ever seasonally, especially for painters, do you guys have like a 7 to 10 of them all together to do a training? Or just one at a time? Give me like a range. How many do you train at a time?
5 at most.
5 at most? So I used to do hand in the can, and I would focus on these key things while I'm working with them. Right tracking versus fast tracking. What do you think that means? Yeah, so right tracking would be like, hey, actually, let's start with fast tracking. Fast tracking would be, hey, here's all the SOPs and here's all the checklists and all the stuff. Right tracking is, hey, are you integrating with our culture? Are you getting along with us? Can we go out for dinner at night? And so when I'm building out my training schedule, I'm not just thinking about all the things I need to show you, I'm also trying to integrate you into us. And so when you're building out your training process, think about how much right tracking do I have compared to my fast tracking? The other thing I think about is my orientation day. I don't get them painting at all. I don't get them starting on any kind of anything. We start in the office, we talk through the company, the history, why we're here, some safety stuff usually. We'll then go to the paint store, they'll meet the paint rep. It's all about relationship and expectation setting. It's a full day committed to that. Any environment, so this is for painters, but it can be for sales, can be for office. Any environment that I have them into training, it's super simple. You guys ever screwed this up before where you bring someone to a super complicated situation day one? Learning does not happen. It's like, well, this is what's in the SOP, but today we're gonna do it a little differently because of X, Y, Z. Just be aware of that, set up the right environment for it. And then I push everyone 120%. So you could go, there's a pace to training when you're doing this where you could be like, hey, we're gonna go till 5 o'clock today, we're gonna start at 9. I'm like, no, we're gonna show up at 7. We're gonna do our prep, we're gonna push extra hard throughout the day, we're gonna take our lunch, then we're gonna go till 5:30. Like I push my teams pretty hard. Why would I wanna do that? To see if they're capable. I wanna set a tone where I know that if I'm at 120, you're gonna show up at 100, maybe 80. But if I show up at 80 for that first week with you, you're going to show up at 60. So just some food for thought on that. Oops. And then when I'm showing them each thing that I'm training them on, I'm following this weird little acronym I learned years ago called DRAGI. I'm making sure that I've demonstrated the task to them, I've observed them do the task, I've then re-demonstrated it to them with some feedback. I've assigned that task to them now to do it on their own, set a goal with them to have it done in a certain amount of time, and finally I inspect. Such a simple acronym, but so many of us will do this and then come back and do this, right? We get busy. I've shown you how to do it all. Why did you screw it all up? It's like, well, you haven't really taken the time to integrate learning. Do DRAGI for each individual thing. And this is interesting for experienced people because they get really frustrated at first. They're like, Danny, why are you showing me how to do caulking? I've done this a million times. I'm like, I just want to make sure that we're on the same page about how we do it, right? Once we've done it once and I can check it off, we never have to go back to it again. But let's do DRAGI for each thing. Because how many of you have assumed that somebody knows what they're doing, and then 6 months later or 3 weeks later, you come back and they do it completely different? How many of your crews have different ways of producing a house, right? Yeah. So I DRAGI everything and hold a standard as we go through it. Now this is good for basic training. This will get a lot of our people up and running and moving, right? This is as I'm leading people throughout the year. You guys ever heard of the situational leadership model before? So this is a model that I keep kind of in the back of my head whenever I'm working with people. What I've just talked you through is I'm being highly directive, right? So I've got SOPs for you, I've got checklists for you, I've got all these little things for you to kind of make sure I'm showing you exactly how to go do this. Over time, if I keep doing this with you, what are you going to do? You get frustrated with me. Why do you keep micromanaging me? Who's heard that from their teams before? So I have to move to this next stage over time with them, which is more coaching. Remember what we talked about earlier about just like having people that think more independently, have more like the ability to problem solve? I need to build their confidence up and their skill as we go. So after I'm done doing initial training, they might come to me and say, I don't know, what would be an example of a question you guys get from somebody you've just trained? Give me a common question. If you've just trained a crew, maybe they're 3 or 4 weeks out, what kind of questions do you get coming back in?
Am I using the right brand for the right area?
Cool, yeah. Am I using the right product? Is that what you're saying? Cool. Am I using the right product? I'd be like, cool. Well, I'll tell you, but at the same time, I want to tell you why we would do it this way. So I'm still going to give them the answer. Yeah, we're going to use Benjamin Moore, high gloss, whatever, because of this specific area. Actually, I've got tons of horror stories of the wrong product in the wrong area. But I want to tell them why. Why do I want to involve the why part at this stage? Makes them think. Do you guys ever take multiple choice tests when you were in school? And you sometimes are just like trying to memorize the answers? You don't really learn anything, right? It's a game of memory. This should be a game of understanding, right? What's the why behind the thing that I have a question around? So make sure as you're training people and they're starting to grow in their skill, you're actually not just giving them the answer anymore, you're involving the why. Slowly over time, what happens next? People get a bit more confident in their ability. Sorry, they get a bit more capable in their ability, but they're missing confidence. You ever notice this where people come to you a year in asking you a question that you know they know the answer to? Why do you think that's happened? What have you created? Their confidence is low. So you've built skill here, right? High direction, involving them in the why. They're starting to become more aware, but they're unfortunately used to you being their safety blanket. And so this is where now you need to move into a supportive role. So they ask you the same question, which product should I use on this? Interesting you should ask, like we've done this job a few times now. In your mind, what do you think would be the best one to use? And bounce it back to them. And get them starting to answer their own questions. Right? And sometimes we get into this mode where we're busy and they're busy and they just need a quick answer and we just want to give them a quick answer so that we can all move on with the day. But I'm telling you, if you just keep that habit up over time, you will create people that are dependent on you. Always. It's a pretty critical phase because I do think a lot of you, when I look at how you guys operate, you do actually a fairly good job here and you do a fairly good job here, but I think you miss this piece because it takes time and it takes intentionality. One other thing I'll say about the situational leadership model as you're leading people is know that this is by skill, not by person. So what do I mean by that? If you're doing office work for the first time because you were a project manager that I had out in the field a lot more, and now I'm finally getting to you to use the CRM we just onboarded properly, I'm probably going to give you a lot of direction on that piece, right? But maybe after 4 years of running production, anything that's production related is highly delegated, right? I'm not trying to make sure that, hey, if I'm high direction for you in one thing, I'm high direction with you in all things. It's what skill are you at in different areas of your development? And be intentional about that, because people mess that up sometimes. Okay, so high direction leads to coaching. Coaching then leads to support. And then finally, over time, you've got their skill up and you've got their confidence up. You can go into delegation. Does that make sense? But a lot of us do high direction. We show them everything they need to do and then go, have fun. Good luck. Just take your time on this. Any questions on this? What do you think what kind of product would you, actually, I'll give you an interesting story. I won't say his name, a franchisee put interior paint all over the exterior of an old Victorian home. And then call me and say the customer is extremely upset. Actually, I'll give it one further. And then the customer asked for their white trim to be glossy. So instead of putting gloss paint over top, he put Varathane over top the flat white. We had to strip the entire house. So he was wrong, and I was supporting him, being like, you got this, for like a week as he's producing this, until I finally got to the site and realized I have way misjudged this. So I went straight to direction with him, and actually I had to take over the job site. But you can back up on it, right? Hey, I was wrong. Hey, understood. Let me give you a high level of direction on this, or let me give you a high level of support on this. So you'll make bad calls all the time. You're not going to be perfect. But it's just being aware as people develop that I need to change my style. How many of you naturally are more direction oriented? Like you just like to give like every little bit of direction that you could possibly give? Cool, there's a lot of us. How many of you are a bit more coaching? Like you like to involve them and have the why and it's kind of there. Okay, and how many of you are good supporters? You always bounce it back to them and they're always getting your team thinking and you're not taking on. And then how many of you are just natural delegators? You just take it and give it off and trust that they'll do it. Oh, very few. Okay, interesting. It's probably a good thing. Natural delegators is really dangerous because they just there's no direction in the company. But all of us have a natural leadership style. And so it's good to recognize what yours is because chances are you will default to it more often than not. And it's only when you're being intentional that you'll actually pick the right one for the right skill within the right person. Make sense? Okay. So we've talked a bit about some structural stuff. We've set expectations with our people. We're now starting to train them, maybe even lead them as they grow in their careers and their skill development over time. The next big thing is we have to hold accountability to our people, right? How many are challenged by this a little bit? Yeah, most of us are. I am too. It's a never-ending thing, but it's a part of our development as leaders to actually do this effectively. So there's some structural stuff, again, I'll show you to this, and there's some more emotional stuff I'll show you on this as well. So do you guys have weekly meetings, team meetings, one-on-ones, something like this? Do they start to feel repetitive sometimes? Yeah. I'll show you the best version of this that I've learned over many years. This was what ran College Pro Painters from the CEO all the way down to the painter. This is how I run my organization at Breakthrough Academy. This is what we fundamentally install in every business that we work with. But we structure it around something called GSNR, which stands for Goal Setting and Review. And we start to tie in all the stuff I've just been talking to you about today, right? So we go to the org structure and we've got numbers and deliverables by role. So I'm not just talking wide company numbers, although we could do a meeting on that. But what's important is I've got my sales manager trying to hit 3.2 million at a 55% closing ratio and maintain a 35% gross profit margin. So there needs to be some accountability around that and some follow-up around that. And I need to coach him, not boss him, into achieving those by year end, right? So we need to have a way to do this. So we have a prep form that everybody would fill out on a Friday where I've got their annual goals here, I've got their quarterly benchmarks, and there's a bunch of other stuff I didn't put in the screenshot, but I've got like the things that they need to get done in the next 2 weeks and the conversations that we need to have. This is their prep to do for me. This is written in their agreement, and this is something that not everybody does on a Friday, so I'm following up Friday afternoon to make sure all this is done. But my key leaders, if you notice, this isn't my painters, this is just for these people, are being led through GSNR, okay? Within that, I've got a way to break down all their metrics. So who does something like this when you do sales planning for the year? You've got like your revenue target, your average job size, your sales ratio, and your lead conversion ratio, and you're able to predict how many leads, estimates, jobs, and dollars you need. We need to do this for our individual leaders as well. So the salesperson or the sales manager, the production person or the production manager needs to take on that level of responsibility within the organization. And you can do this monthly, but for painters, I recommend it be weekly, where they can see the breakdown of how many, for salespeople, leads, estimates, jobs, and dollars they need to have and where they're at on that. For production, it's dollars produced, hours produced, and or gross profit achieved. But this is a running tally as we go through the year now that helps us see if we're ahead, if we're behind, by how much, and then in GSR, we discuss why. This kind of make sense? It's not fair to set goals with people in their employment agreements and set expectations and then not have this level of coaching and support along the way. Because they're not going to probably figure it out through random chance. And I really encourage you guys, we'll give you a resource on this. Don't just do this for your business, do this for these individual roles. Okay? How many of you have middle management? I'll call it sales manager, production manager. How many have that? Okay. This is vital. Without something like this, you'll always feel like you're doing half their job for them because they're going to be misguided and they won't fully know where they're at versus where they should be. So they're sending in their prep. We're reviewing goals versus actuals. The meeting looks something like this. It's half hour long. Doesn't need to be an hour. It's once a week. We're doing an open and check-in. Where are they at? How are they doing? We review last week's goals, right? Where are they at? Are we ahead or behind? By how much? Why? I'm not looking at just the week. I'm actually also looking at like for the year, if they're trending ahead or behind. We then look at future goals. What are the goals for the next week or two? And then any administrative items. So I'll break this down a little further. When I'm doing my check-in, that first 5 minutes, this is going to guide the entire meeting. So how many do this right now? You have like a one-on-one with people? Couple? I find when we get into these meetings, I will say this, where they can get rhythmic and boring, is when you're just doing numbers. When it's just, where are you at on the number? Are you ahead or behind? Okay, great, move on. There's an emotional component to this, where people sometimes are in the game, out of the game, confused, misaligned, angry at you, angry about something, and you need to take time at this stage in that meeting to really open up the conversation for that. So one of the big things that I've learned over many years is not to always be so rigid in my GSRs, not to always just make it around the agenda I just showed you, but to be able to pivot as a leader. I don't get into the full conflict in GSR, but I will listen to somebody who's misaligned, who's frustrated, who's not hitting their goals, and slow down that meeting and actually change that half an hour to be more of a conversation of understanding. So how would I explain this? What are some big conflicts you guys have right now? Give me some scenarios. You don't have to give me names. Who wants to give me some crap that's going on in the company? Don't all go at once. What do you think? What's a big conflict you've had?
I want to raise.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, so you're sitting there, you're like, hey, we're going to set goals this week. And they're like, I'm not making enough money, bro. Okay. Biggest thing in that meeting anyways is I would be setting up another time to talk about it, but I would be acknowledging them. Say, hey man, awesome, I hear you. What's frustrating you in this? What's going on? How are you feeling? Tell me more. Why don't we set up a time, let's go out for lunch, and let's have a meeting where we can actually discuss this properly. I try not to do the full conflict in that meeting. It's just like it's too truncated, it's not the right time, but I will set up an environment where we can properly have a conversation around it. So this was the table topics we had, yeah. So we've talked about setting proper expectations. How many of you could do probably a little better job setting expectations early on? How roles are set up, what the people's roles are, what they aren't, how they have deliverables. We talked a bit about onboarding and training, and actually within that even situational leadership, which is the tail afterwards. How many of you could probably do a better job there, leading and developing our people? I think all of us probably. And then we talked a bit about accountability meetings, holding tension to the goal, structuring basically goal setting review meetings ongoing, and driving them as a coach through their year. Who feels that? Cool. And then I had a side thing with conflict, which is good, but it's a part of the accountability conversation. Okay. Generally, I think that I'm 39 now. I've been doing this since I was 18 years old. So I'm about 20 years into running businesses with people. I'm not perfect at this. No one will ever be perfect at this, and that's totally okay. But just know that we run people businesses. We don't sell a widget, right? We sell labor, we sell experience, we sell personality. Our ability to get better at these things is our ability to grow our business. You can put whatever you want on an Excel sheet for growth. You want to 2x a company next year? Cool. How much have you grown as a leader? How much structure have you put in place to help your people grow as leaders themselves? And are you ready for what that actually means? It's an awesome thing to do. It's an amazing thing to do. But it takes real work and it takes real intention. We didn't talk as much about recruiting today, but a lot of what we talked about becomes a lot more, it makes a lot more sense when you've got a good recruiting process to bring in good humans with good expectations. And what I found after 20 years of doing this is like my job is to go find amazing humans, bring them into a great environment, and be the best damn leader I possibly could be for them. My job is not to do their job. My job is not to be the best, smartest person in the room. My job is to not bring all the answers, but it's to set up a pipeline of really good humans and then create an amazing environment for them to thrive and be there to hold that space for them as they grow and develop over time. A lot easier said than done, but that's the pursuit, right? So I encourage you as you grow over the next couple of years, like make that more of the focus than just hard grinding, knuckle holding, do it myselfing, right? Start to build into your people. Yeah, I mean, this is what I've noticed. This is what happens in a lot of our companies, but yeah, progress stops depending on you, right? Which can be scary for some of us, but it's really important. Yeah, no more half handovers and hovering. How many of you do this a little bit? Like you kind of give it to people, but you know they're going to screw it up, so you like check all their work all the time. Yeah, stop doing it. The team starts to have more buy-in to the vision, and this becomes more of a career for them than just a transactional job that you've set up. Your top performers will learn a lot more. Not everyone in the company, and that's okay, right? But stop giving just like, 5 minutes, okay. Stop giving just meaningless raises. Let them go earn it. Let them go become a valuable part of the organization. And so I like to set up a bonus structure that allows that to be more than just my 5% raise for the year. It's like, here's your bonus process. Go and build whatever the hell you want within my organization. Yeah, and we didn't get into recruiting today, but man, when you start to understand what you've built here and you can pipe it with a good recruitment process, like you can build whatever you want, right? It could be a painting company, it could be a totally different business. That is business. So it's just cool testimonials, but like Devin, we doubled his business actually over, I think it was about 2-3 years. Total staff doubled up, hours obviously went down. Mason's insane. You guys know Mason? He's a good human, yeah. Anyway, that guy, we 10x'd his business, more than that even actually. Took him from $500K to $6.3 million. Staff, when we started with him at 2, brought him up to 15 plus his subs. And again, time, just way down. But it's not just about, Mason doing all of this. It was about how he built and organized his team. And if you talk to him to this day, he's an amazing leader. I actually like working with him, like Mason, like, who the hell, what have we created? Because when I met him, he was just a young kid for the little painting company. But incredible leader, very young still too, actually. But what's neat is these are the principles that this guy's adopted. And it's about his people driving it, not about him. The guy only works 28 hours a week. It's pretty neat. So, general question on this, as you go through this year, who guides you? Who holds you accountable? It's freeing sometimes and fun, but it's a bit cavalier, isn't it? Yeah. So, this is what we do. This is what we've been doing for many, many years, but we guide you. We take the time. My background at College Pro was to be a GM, was to be the general manager of franchisees, to manage and drive performance and make sure that they were able to grow and develop and be led, just like I talked to you guys about you do for your people. Our job is to do that for owners. It's a pretty interesting job. We've got lots we do, and I could always get into it in a one-on-one conversation if you'd like. But just know that as a business owner, you need the same development that I just talked to you about to do with your people. Is that fair to say? I'm an entrepreneur myself. We're not natural-born business people. We're natural-born entrepreneurs. That is a very different thing. And you need leadership training and development, and you need to be held accountable to your numbers, and you need structure and direction, and you need clarity, you need a sounding board, and you need someone to get pissed off at when things aren't going well, and I get it. So that's what we do. And I can get into the details if you want to chat with me one-on-one. This is what I look for every day. Someone at this growth phase, right? There is this phase when you start to get to $1 million a year where things start to change, and it's not about you anymore, it's about your team. When you're at 500K, 300K, it is a lot still about you. But when you grow up into these numbers, you have to build these structures and you have to build these leadership practices in place. Because what happens is this, bottlenecks become you, right? You grow, but you're not profitable. The team is begging for structure, but it's coming out in conflict. They're bitching about stuff all the time. I think all of us probably need better A players, which again, I didn't get into it today, but there's a whole recruiting process that all of us need to get better at. I think as an industry, we complain about it, but we're not doing it justice. There's a lot more time, money, and effort that can be put into recruitment. And a lot of us are trying to build systems, and I get it. And actually, this industry is evolving quite a bit, which is really cool to see. But you're trying to do it for the first time, just like a customer painting their house for the first time. Like it's probably a better way to do it. So that's what we help with. So yeah. What was your biggest takeaway today? We talked about a lot. If you think about what we talked about setting up expectations. We talked about training and development. We talked about goal setting review, conflict. What's one thing that can come out of today for you guys? I got a bunch for you guys. So example employment agreements, goal setting dashboards, GSR prep sheets, that critical conversations framework where we talked about how to handle conflict, and some SOPs so that you can kind of copy off some of our stuff. So you guys good with that? You want some of these things? So I will give you this. If you scan that, gives you a chance to talk to us as well. So if you're interested in just figuring out what BTA is and what we do and how we could help you, make sure you check off that you'd like to be contacted by us. But our role, essentially, is to hold you guys as owners accountable, structure your organizations properly, and help you actually scale from this like $750K to $10 million range. It's a journey that you all will take. And it's not rocket science, but it does take some very specific structure and like skill development for you. Okay? So I'll let you guys fill that out. Now I'll let you share. And if anyone wants to stick around and ask me questions, I can answer any questions. And we can go from there. But I didn't want to hold you guys up. Is there any questions actually from today? It's good. I encourage you, just take one thing from today. Doesn't need to be crazy. I would say for you. Have fun with this. Have you guys ever noticed there's like years where you have a lot of fun in business and there's years where you don't? Change your mind. It's 2026. I don't know if you had a good year or bad year last year, but I encourage you, like, go find the positive elements of this next fiscal year. Go build a cool team. Go have fun with your team. That's what they want to. There's an element to all this structural stuff, and I'm going to be your leader, and just go have fun too. Don't forget that. A lot happens when you just have joy in what you're doing. I think all of us have started a business and probably remember the butterflies when we started our companies. Do you remember that? Don't forget that. It's easy to forget when we get beat over the head with, like, I talked to a guy earlier that's getting sued. I talked to another guy earlier that half his team's leaving him, and they're like, oh, and I'm like, yeah, but like, don't forget about the fun. One thing that's always kept me kind of on the right mental space to lead and do all this type of stuff is I remember how blessed I am to live here, right? We live in North America. We can eat, sleep, poop, and breathe. That's pretty fucking good. And remember that, because this business thing we do is a bit of a game. And it should be a fun game, like a game of Monopoly, but it can get stressful. People can throw Monopoly pieces at each other. But remember, it's still just a game. And your livelihoods, and I get it, like there's money flying through the air, you're still gonna be able to do the basics that most of the world can't. So feel blessed in that. Have fun with your teams. Don't approach things from fear, but from aspiration. And a lot of this gets a lot easier. Okay? All right. That is it. I'll let you get out of here.